My ex-girlfriend, who cheated on me with her fitness trainer, just reached out to me after a year of complete silence. Now, her life's in shambles, and she's looking to get back together. Hey everyone, my name's Mark. I'm 28 years old, and something happened recently that's thrown me for a loop. I've been sitting here, trying to make sense of it, and I honestly don't even know where to start. Maybe putting it out here will help me work through the mess of emotions I'm feeling. Just to keep things anonymous, I'll be changing the names, but every detail is, unfortunately, all too real. To give you some background, a little over a year ago, I was in what I thought was a solid, serious relationship with my girlfriend of 3 years. I'll call her Megan. She's 27 now. From my perspective, things were going really well between us. We had that rhythm couples get into when they've been together for a while and still enjoy each other's company. We've been talking about moving in together and even tossing around ideas about marriage. Not planning anything concrete, but having those hypothetical conversations that make you think you're on the same page, moving toward the future together. Around this time, I decided to get more serious about my fitness. Like a lot of people, I'd been a bit too relaxed on the health front and felt like I was falling out of shape. I wanted to make a change, so I went ahead and hired a personal trainer. Enter Jake, who's 30. Jake was one of those guys who's got this magnetic personality. You know the type. He's funny, outgoing, and has that kind of confidence that puts people at ease right off the bat. He seemed to get along with everyone, and it wasn't hard to see why people liked him. At one of my sessions, I thought, why not introduce him to Megan? She wasn't really into fitness before, but maybe she'd enjoy tagging along, even if it was just once in a while. To my surprise, Megan and Jake hit it off immediately. They had this easy chemistry right from the start, and honestly, I didn't think much of it at the time. I saw it as a good thing. Megan seemed genuinely motivated, and I thought maybe this could be a new, healthy hobby for us both. It felt like a positive change in our lives. For a while, I even saw their interactions as something that was bringing us closer. Megan would come back from her sessions with Jake and talk about the different workouts they did or how she felt stronger than before. I was proud of her progress, and it felt good to see her so enthusiastic. I didn't realize then that I might have been a little too trusting, but after a few months, things started to change, subtly at first, then in ways I couldn't ignore. Megan began to act distant. It wasn't just her being physically absent, though that was part of it. She felt emotionally out of reach, like there was this barrier between us that I couldn't break through. The more I tried to connect, the more she seemed to drift away. It was as if the Megan I knew had started to fade, replaced by someone else entirely. She was busy, all the time after her workout sessions with Jake. Before, she'd come straight home, and we'd have dinner together, maybe watch a show or just hang out. But suddenly, there were all these little detours. Instead of heading back, she'd tell me she needed to cool down, or grab a bite, or run an errand. Hours would pass and she'd roll in late, with vague excuses that felt paper-thin. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but every excuse sounded more suspicious than the last. Her phone habits, too, started shifting in strange ways. Megan was never one to be glued to her phone before. She'd leave it lying around or barely even look at it half the time. But now, she was hyper-aware of it. She kept it on Do Not Disturb mode at all hours, even when she was home, which was new. If a message came through, she'd grab it quickly and turn away, like she didn't want me to see. The phone would always be face down on the table or kept in her pocket. These were little things, sure, but combined, they started to feel like something bigger, something darker. When I'd ask her about it, she'd dismiss me. Megan would give me this exasperated look, like I was the one being unreasonable. "You're being paranoid," she'd say, brushing me off. Every time she said that, I'd feel a stab of self-doubt, like maybe I was losing my mind. It was as if she was trying to make me question my own instincts, to make me feel like the problem was me. But that gut feeling, that nagging sense that something wasn't right, it wouldn't go away. It was there every time she ignored my texts during her supposed gym hours or brushed off my questions. I wanted to trust her, though. We'd been together for 3 years. I thought I knew her, thought our relationship was strong enough to weather whatever this strange phase was. I tried to convince myself that maybe she was just going through a tough time, that maybe she needed space and wasn't ready to talk about it yet. I tried to push the doubts aside and told myself I was just overthinking it. Looking back now, maybe I ignored the red flags because I didn't want to face the truth. I was so sure of Megan, so confident that she was the person I believed her to be, that the idea of betrayal seemed impossible. So I dismissed my own instincts. I told myself that Jake was just a good guy, a charismatic trainer doing his job, and that Megan was just inspired by his energy. I convinced myself that they were friends, nothing more, even though her actions were chipping away at me bit by bit. As the weeks went by, the distance between us only grew. Conversations that once flowed easily now felt stilted. I could feel her pulling away, even as I tried to bridge the gap. I started doing little things to try and win her back, surprising her with her favorite meals, planning nights out, bringing up old memories that once made us laugh. But it was like throwing pebbles at a wall. Nothing seemed to get through to her. She'd respond, but there was no spark, no warmth. The person I loved was slipping further away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. At one point, I thought about confronting Jake, just to clear the air. Part of me wanted to believe that if I got his perspective, I'd find out there was nothing to worry about. But another part of me was terrified of what I might learn. So I stayed silent, hoping the storm would pass and that things would somehow go back to the way they were. But the more I held on to that hope, the more it felt like I was grasping at shadows. The trust one once had in her was unraveling, piece by piece, and I felt like I was losing myself in the process. I didn't know who to talk to, didn't know how to handle the weight of my suspicions. Every day felt like a game of pretending, acting like I was fine while my insides churned with doubt and insecurity. Well, turns out I wasn't just overthinking things or getting paranoid. One night, Megan had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. Now, she was usually meticulous about keeping it with her, so the sight of it just sitting there made my stomach twist with unease. It was like some invisible force was nudging me to look at it, almost daring me. I wasn't the type to snoop, but at that moment, it felt like every suspicion, every doubt, was right there in front of me, waiting to be confirmed. And sure enough, her screen lit up with a text. No, a string of texts from Jake. They just kept popping up, one after another, so fast I could barely read them before the next one appeared. But it didn't take much to see what was going on. Let's just say these weren't the kinds of messages you'd expect between a trainer and his client. They weren't talking about meal plans, workouts, or anything remotely professional. No, these messages were charged, way too personal. I felt my face flush with a mix of anger and betrayal as I read through the texts, my mind barely processing the flood of words on the screen. Without hesitating, I called out her name. She must have heard the sharpness in my voice because she came out of the bathroom, her face wrapped in a towel, looking slightly alarmed. I held up her phone, and for a split second, I saw it. The flash of guilt, the widening of her eyes, the way her mouth opened and then closed as if she were grappling for some excuse, some way to wriggle out of this. But she knew she was caught. There was no hiding it. Right there, standing in front of me, Megan broke down. She didn't try to deny it, didn't offer any flimsy explanations or try to gaslight me. Instead, she admitted it flat out. She'd been cheating on me with Jake for months. She poured out all these things I wasn't ready to hear, telling me she had fallen in love with him. She kept insisting it wasn't about me, that it was something she just couldn't control, as if her betrayal was some irresistible force that she was helpless against. That conversation still haunts me. I remember how she looked, the way she spoke, the way her words sliced through me with a cold finality that left me feeling hollow. She packed her things and moved in with him within the week. Just like that, she was gone, as if the 3 years we'd shared meant nothing. I watched her walk out the door and felt my entire world collapse in on itself. It was like everything I had known, every bit of security and love I thought I had, was torn away in an instant. That was, without a doubt, the darkest period of my life. I've had tough times before, but nothing could have prepared me for the kind of heartbreak and betrayal I felt in the weeks that followed. It wasn't just that she'd left. It was that she'd chosen someone else over me, that the life I thought we were building together was nothing but a lie. I couldn't eat, I could barely sleep, and every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were those text messages, flashing in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't escape. But as they say, time heals, or at least it softens the edges of the pain. I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I got into therapy, dove back into the gym with a vengeance, and leaned on my friends, who became my lifeline. Each day felt a little less painful, the ache a little less sharp. Slowly but surely, I began to move on, though I knew I'd never be quite the same. The experience left a scar, deep and unmistakable, one I knew I'd carry for a long time. Then, just a few days ago, out of the blue, she reached out to me. A whole year of silence, and suddenly there she was, popping back into my life like a ghost I thought I'd put to rest. The number was unrecognized, and at first, I thought it might be spam. But something made me pause before blocking it. I can't explain it, but I was curious. Maybe part of me wanted to know what she could possibly have to say after all this time. So I opened the message. The moment I saw her name, my pulse quickened, a mix of dread and disbelief tightening in my chest. There she was, Megan, my ex, the woman who had ripped my heart out, reaching out as if nothing had happened. She started off cautiously, saying she missed me, that she was sorry for everything that had happened, that she'd made a huge mistake. As I read on, the irony hit me like a punch to the gut. Turns out, her perfect life with Jake had been anything but. According to her, things went downhill fast. She explained how, just a few months after moving in with him, she found out Jake was cheating on her. She admitted the irony of it all, but she didn't need to spell it out for me. I could see the twisted karma playing out perfectly. The guy she'd left me for, the one she claimed to be in love with, turned out to be just as unfaithful, just as incapable of commitment as she'd been. She went on to describe her life now, saying how miserable and lonely she's been, how everything feels empty without me. Apparently, she's been thinking about reaching out for months, but was too ashamed, or maybe too afraid of what I'd say. And now, with her life in ruins, she's hoping I'd still have a place for her, that maybe I could help her pick up the pieces. Her words stirred up a mix of emotions that I hadn't expected. Part of me felt vindicated, almost satisfied to see her going through the same kind of pain she put me through. But another part of me felt this aching sadness, a kind of pity that surprised me. I thought I was done with her, that I'd moved on. But here she was, back in my life like a haunting echo from the past, reopening wounds I thought had healed. I haven't responded yet. A part of me wants to ignore her, to let her stew in her own regrets. But another part of me feels like maybe, just maybe, there's something left to say. After all, we did share 3 years together, 3 years that once meant something, even if they ended in betrayal. I keep asking myself if closure is something I owe her, or if it's something I still need for myself. In a way, her message has left me more confused than ever. I find myself wondering if people really can change, if second chances are ever worth it, or if going back would just reopen old wounds. I spent so long putting myself back together after she left. Do I really want to risk tearing myself apart again, just to give her some sense of peace? The questions are endless, and the answers seem further away than ever. But as I sit here, I can't help but feel like this isn't the end of the story, like there's more waiting around the corner, something unexpected that I haven't yet seen. She told me she realizes now what we had was real, that she understands it in a way she never did before. With a shaky voice, she confessed, "I want to make things right." There was an ache in her tone that stirred something deep inside me. For the first time, she sounded genuinely remorseful, like someone who's lost everything and desperately wants one last chance to make amends. She claimed she was willing to do anything to prove she's changed and asked if we could meet up to talk. Now, here I am, standing at this strange crossroads, torn between the past and a future I don't fully understand. Part of me still holds feelings for her, ones I buried so deep that I almost convinced myself they were gone. But another part of me is screaming to block her and walk away for good, as she truly deserves. There's this raw, unhealed scar she left on my heart, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to open that wound again, to let her back in after the destruction she caused. Trusting her feels impossible, yet hearing her sound so broken stirred something up in me, some mix of pity and nostalgia. Or maybe I'm just fooling myself, thinking it's still possible to forgive her. In a moment of weakness, or maybe a glimmer of hope, I agreed to meet up with her. I needed to see her face, to look into her eyes and determine if she truly meant what she was saying. When the day came, I waited at a quiet cafe we used to visit, a place filled with memories that felt almost ghostly now. As I sat there nursing a cup of coffee, I kept glancing at the door, half hoping she wouldn't show up, that fate would intervene and spare me from facing the emotional storm brewing inside me. But she walked in, and for a brief moment, it felt like the old days. She looked as I remembered, with that same soft expression that once brought me so much joy. When our eyes met, there was something in her gaze, a sorrow, maybe regret, that hadn't been there before. We talked, and she poured out apologies, telling me how empty her life had become, how she couldn't forgive herself for what she'd done. She asked if there was any way to start over, to heal what she'd shattered. Listening to her, I wanted to believe it was possible, that we could erase the past and start fresh. But as I looked at her, a weight settled on my chest, the painful truth I'd been avoiding for so long surfacing. I realized that I could never fully trust her again, that the scars she left would never fade. No matter what promises she made, we could never go back. There was too much broken between us, too much lost. In a moment of clarity, I decided to end it right then and there. I told her I was letting her go, that we both deserved a chance to move on, even if it hurt. I thought that would be the end of it, a bittersweet but peaceful closure. But life had other plans. A week after that meeting, I received a call from one of her friends, her voice choked with tears. "It's Megan. She's been in a car accident," she said, each word piercing through the fog of disbelief. "They found a note in her car, addressed to you." My heart raced as she continued, explaining that Megan hadn't survived the crash. The irony of it hit me hard. Just when I'd finally let go, life had taken her away completely. And now, all I'm left with is the weight of her absence, a love we could never mend, and a pain that will linger, a tragic reminder of a future that'll never be. I was devastated, lost in a whirlwind of emotions. How could this happen? I barely had time to process her apology before she was gone. I needed closure, something tangible to hold on to. As I prepared to attend her funeral, I found myself searching for the note her friend mentioned. It was the last piece of her I had left. At the funeral, the atmosphere was heavy with grief and regret. Megan's family was there, along with a few friends, but I noticed something off. Jake was in attendance too, lurking at the back. The very man who had caused all this pain stood there, and my stomach churned. I wanted to confront him, but the moment never came. Instead, as I approached the casket, I caught a glimpse of her note tucked inside a bouquet of flowers. I grabbed it, trembling as I unfolded the paper. The words on the page tore through me. "I'm sorry for everything. I messed up in ways I can't even explain. You were the best thing in my life, and I took that for granted. I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could replace what we had, but nothing compares. Please forgive me." Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. I was overwhelmed by grief and anger. The irony felt unbearable. She finally realized the truth, but it was too late. Just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Jake. "I'm really sorry for your loss," he said, sincerity etched on his face. Before I could respond, he continued, "I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm trying to change. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Megan didn't deserve it either. She told me about the note. She was desperate to fix things with you." I was taken aback. Could he really be feeling remorse? Or was this just a pathetic attempt to absolve himself? "You think this changes anything?" I shot back, my voice low and filled with anger. "You stole my life, man. You took her away from me, and now she's gone forever." But Jake didn't back down. "I know what I did was terrible. I never wanted it to end like this. I loved her, but I realize now that she loved you first. She was always meant to be with you." His words rattled me. Was he really sincere? Just then, the last twist in this tragic tale struck. As I stood there, still clutching the note, I realized I wasn't just mourning Megan. I was mourning the life we could have had together, the future we'd planned, the dreams we'd shared, all gone in a heartbeat. I turned away from Jake and walked out of the funeral home, the weight of sorrow suffocating me. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected package at my doorstep. Inside was a small wooden box, intricately carved. I opened it to find a locket, one Megan had worn during our time together. Attached was another note, this one written by her mother. Megan wanted you to have this. She cherished your time together and hoped you could remember her with love. As I held the locket in my hand, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. I felt anger, sadness, and yet a strange sense of peace. In that moment, I realized that while I could never change the past or erase the scars, I could choose how I remembered her. I could hold on to the good memories, the love we shared, and let the rest go. But as I stood there, a deep melancholy settled in. The tragic reality hit me hard. Love can be beautiful, but it can also leave the most devastating scars. I would carry the pain of this loss forever, a reminder of the girl who once held my heart but ultimately couldn't find her way back to me. And just like that, the last thread of our story unraveled, leaving me with nothing but echoes of a love lost, an unfulfilled promise, and the harsh truth that life doesn't always grant second chances.